So one of my friends who's going to be in Minnesota called me yesterday specifically to ask, because I was talking in a group chat about they should come by or whatever, and I said I would tell them when. My friend called me specifically to be like, can I meet Money?
Oh, God.
And I was like, sure, absolutely.
Tell him he's going to be wildly disappointed. Welcome to Game Theory and Money Off Week edition. This is our Super Bowl preview, the week before the week, as the Super Bowl is here. Cynthia, of course, with her fancy degrees in predictive analytics, her MBA, her Northwestern education, uses her own model to run 10,000 simulations to make predictions that, using math, we hope, are as accurate as any could possibly be. So today we kind of take a look back, Cynthia, because clearly not only was your model, but pretty much everybody's idea of the NFC Championship was horribly wrong, because regardless of who you thought was going to win, everybody pretty much thought this was going to be a really tight competition, and it was very hard to figure out who was going to come out and represent the NFC in the Super Bowl. So why don't we get straight to that and figure out why it went so bad for Minnesota, and if in fact there was something. Because, we all have hindsight, whether or not there was something that we ought to have picked up on to come to the conclusion that led to a 38-7 Eagle domination over the Vikings.
I mean, ultimately, the thing you saw in this game, the early lead that Philadelphia jumped out to, and then they never stopped passing. Usually you see the team start to run. They really couldn't catch up. So the Vikings, they just didn't have a chance to catch up after. The third downs, I love third down conversion percentage. That was a really big area where there was a big problem. They actually went right at Harrison Smith, which was surprising to me because Harrison Smith, he's one of the top
safety.
Totally. And Zach Ertz specifically, 4 of Zach Ertz's 8 receptions were in Harrison Smith's coverage. 5 of Zach Ertz's 8 receptions went for first downs. And listen, 4 of those were on third down. So third down, where we saw Minnesota be the best in the league, and, obviously the Eagles third best in the league, we saw Minnesota not be able to perform on third down on defense like we had anticipated and seen all season long.
And we said, repeatedly throughout our podcasts, the best predictor of win-loss is turnovers. The second best predictor is third downs.
3 turnovers.
Well, that's the key. I mean, when you're up 7-0 and the crowd is freaking out because you just marched straight down the field against the Eagles defense that was supposed to be one of the 2 or 3 best in all the NFL, and then on the very next offensive possession after they failed to score, instead of building your lead to 10-0 or 14-0, you throw a pick 6. And now the environment inside that stadium has changed completely. The Eagles probably feel a lot better about themselves, and those are things that just can't be measured by analytics, is the swing of emotions, and that was a dramatic swing of emotion and momentum.
Totally. And you also saw Nick Foles with his 116.4 passer rating in his 3 career playoff games. That's just crazy. That's all 3. So obviously not just the 2 we saw
this season. Yeah, he had 1 more with the Eagles.
Highest Cincinnati player since 1970, and pretty much that's driven by last game.
Yeah, I mean, it was an outlier. Well, I don't want to say it's an outlier game, but yeah, you would have to believe it's probably an outlier game, and I think a lot of that, like you said, had to do with sort of the confluence of all these touchdowns in the first half, Minnesota trying to play catch-up, and that just, it's the old Mike Tyson. Everybody's got a plan till you get punched in the face, and that's what happened. I mean, the Vikings really took a punch there in the first half. Yeah,
and then, so going back to Nick Foles for a second, I will say it's maybe an outlier because for it's very unlikely that if you're up so much, you're going to keep throwing the ball, which is what they kept doing. And also, if you look at Nick Foles' first 4 games that he played this season, he was 2 of 15 on passes that were 20-plus yards downfield. He had like a passer rating of 14.
That's bad.
That's pretty bad. In this specific game, he was 4 of 6 for 172 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's a passer rating of 149.3, so 150. That's a lot more. 135 more, right?
I think, as I mentioned, as we try to figure out why it happened, and neither of us took the Eagles, and then on our, on the Damashek podcast, all 4 of us, Hank Sheck, the 2 of us, all took the Vikings. Eagles fans, certainly as their dog face T-shirts suggest, they recognize that they were underdogs throughout the entire postseason, despite having the number 1 seed and the best record. I guess the one thing that maybe we should have kicked around a little bit more was being outside and being on the road, and that didn't necessarily play into Case Keenum's strength. It's hard to talk about the Packer game because it was Brett Hundley, and he was so bad against that really good defense. The 2 wins over the Falcons and the Lions late, of course, were indoors. And then you kind of had that Panther game where Keenum struggled a little bit. And it's not like there's severe elements in Carolina, but it's a really good team that made the postseason. It was a hostile environment. It was an outdoor environment, and that certainly was far from his best game. It's a small sample size. I know you hate those as an analytics person, but
there's not a lot you can do.
That was maybe a flag you could have leaned on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was a close game. I think the model was like, it was sub 60% that the Vikings were going to win. It was not a strong indicator for them. So it wasn't like this game where you're expecting this blowout and then you're getting like they weren't like huge underdogs.
Case Keenum picked a bad time to have the worst game of his season.
Right. And also, what we've seen from Case Keenum didn't project for him. Like, you could have said beforehand, you could have been like, well, if they get down or if they turn the ball over a lot, but you could say that about every quarterback.
Sure.
Right? Like, so, except for maybe Tom Brady. But apart from that, that team isn't built. When you're facing 2 really strong run defenses like that, passing is going to make all the difference. If you have 3 turnovers and then you're behind, it's really going to be hard to get yourself out of that hole.
And again,
against those run defenses.
And again, it's, I hate to do it because it's the old what if game, and that's not what I'm trying to do, but that pick 6 does not happen. And you credit Chris Long. He got in there. He altered that throw. It led to the interception. You just wonder how much different the game script would have been for either team had Minnesota been able to score on their first 2 drives. Eagles shut out, go down by 2 scores, and what happens in that environment.
The other thing that actually really like forecasts going forward is where the Eagles D line was able to get pressure on the Minnesota offensive line in the middle. These are the places like when you look for Tom Brady next week or this week or whatever week you're listening to this podcast ahead of the Super Bowl, where are those pressures coming from? And in that whole D line, it's coming from every direction.
And especially when it comes up the middle. I mean, it's just a different type of pressure. And it's pressure that we talked about with Tom Brady, and
I'm saving all my good Fletcher Cox notes for later, so I just want to
for next week.
Well, not for next week, but we have some fun stuff later on in this show, so I'm saving a little bit of it for that. But Fletcher Cox showed me something that could be very problematic for the Patriots.
He's very good. Let's get to the Patriots. Good. Speaking of them and their 24-20 win over the Jaguars, I'll just say, before you get into the analytics, never did I think the Patriots were going to lose that game. I just didn't.
Neither did I.
And you know what? It's weird because they were being manhandled. They really were. Blake Bortles had that was the one weakness that we looked for. We're like, well, it's Blake Bortles. He played well. Blake Bortles played well.
The 2 things we were leaning on, like getting pressure on Tom Brady and the defensive secondary for the Jags, both were kind of not what you expected.
Because Tom Brady, it is remarkable. The guy's 40 years old. He is not mobile, and there were bodies flying all around him, and he took some hits. It's just it's so crazy to watch him operate in the pocket and just how 6 inches to a foot can be all the difference in the world.
And
how
without Gronk?
He is the master of it. It is amazing to see him elude the pressure without having – it's like a sixth sense. He just knows where every body is around him, and he only has to move a foot to 3 feet to get away from it inside of maybe a 5-foot square space. And it really is something to behold.
It's really interesting when you look at the pressures. You talked about seeing Tom Brady get pressured. Actually, when you go back and look to see how many times he was under pressure, they all occurred in the first half, or almost all occurred in the first half. They weren't able to get and maintain pressure on Tom Brady in the second half, and they only pressured Brady on 21%, so like 9 of his 42 dropbacks. That's 10% less than his season average, which was pretty surprising for me. And it's coming from the outside, which is, the tackles played really. Cameron Fleming had a great game. They come from the edge in that game. Marcel Darius, who you love talking about, he went out.
And so did Calais Campbell for a stretch there.
So
that's certainly
changed the ability to get pressure on Tom Brady. And obviously, Danny Amendola became the hero in this game. We talked about the middle of the field being where the Jags are vulnerable. We saw Danny Amendola crush the middle of the field. 145.1 passer rating when Tom Brady targeted him. Tom Brady's passer rating was that when he targeted him. Losing Gronk is a big loss, obviously.
Huge. And we talked about there's no way to cover him. As great as Jalen Ramsey is and as intriguing as that matchup was going to be, it just doesn't matter. I mean, it does not matter. No one player can do it.
both Ramsey and Boye allowed 4 of their 5 each targets against them to be caught, which was interesting. And the one thing that also was a big deal that kind of projects forward to this next game is pass interference. So the defensive pass interferences that they caused changed the opportunity for New England, and that's something that in the Super Bowl, pass interference on deep passes specifically is something that could be a predictor.
It goes beyond just the idea of a completion for a score or whatever. A lot of times that's all you're trying to do, and teams will plan for that in the huddle. They will say, hey, look, I'm going to throw it up, do everything you can to create contact, slow down, speed up, break a little bit here and there. You try to draw that contact and draw that flag, and that's, the deep pass is still effective in that manner.
I want to give some love to Blake Bortles since we've called him garbage a lot.
Trash, not garbage.
Trash, sorry.
Because we're quoting Jadeveon Clowney.
Correct.
Blake Bortles is trash.
So he was actually pressured on, you ready for it? 48.7% of his play. What?
That's a high clip.
Like, think of 30 as like a high number. 30%. 48.7. So congratulations, Patriots. That was something we saw.
And they were having injury issues along their offensive line.
They were, but
as well.
But I mean, they exploited it. And Teron Armstead, who's that, that's the wrong team, but whatever. I was thinking about
Cam.
Thank you.
Robinson. There you go.
I don't know why those two names got mixed up in my head, but whatever. Cam Robinson was in and out.
Arkansas Pine Bluff. I mean, I guess Jacksonville. You think about anyway.
I like that you can make the connection. But ultimately, you saw him go in and out, and it wasn't just where the left tackle was missing. It was also in other spots, which, I mean, look, 50%, almost half of his dropbacks. Not that he drops back a ton, but still pretty impressive.
As far as the Jags go, the most interesting thing is going to be what do they do with the quarterback position next year, and were those not just a single tier,
soon, right?
Like a Native American because you're throwing your trash out on the Great Plains, but, Bortles had those double tiers from each eye, and you wonder.
I know, him crying actually made me feel bad.
You wonder if he says, man, this was my chance, and it ain't going to happen because I'm not coming back here for $16 million. I
actually think that they're going to, we're going to decide the next month here.
Yeah, exactly. See whether or not they bring him back. He certainly played well enough. Not in the Buffalo game, but most definitely in the Pittsburgh and the New England game to maybe get another shot at it.
Their cap situation is in like the bottom third of the league, so they don't have a ton of cap room to play.
They spent it all this last offseason.
Yeah, they spent a lot this past offseason. They did a great job of drafting. I think I wouldn't actually be surprised if Blake Bortles remained on their roster. However, I do think they potentially would bring someone else in additionally.
Yeah,
not someone super expensive, Kirk Cousins, but I do think someone kind of in that more mid-tier.
Alex Smith, maybe.
That kind of, like a more mid-tier guy that you don't need to pay $31 million to get.
But, again, just going back to that game, Blake Bortles did enough. He did. They were up 10.
Imagine if Blake Bortles is your backup.
Yeah.
You're really happy.
But he's a $15 million backup. That's the problem, which is why if he ain't starting, he's gone. I can't imagine that they want a $15 million guy backing up someone like Alex Smith, who's probably going to cost him $20 million or so to put on the roster.
For $5 million more, you get Alex Smith.
That's the question.
That's how you gotta look at your BATNA.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like you got to figure out 15 for Bortles or 20 for Smith.
I think I'd pay the extra $5.
Me too.
White the single back with Brady up under center. He takes the snap. He play fakes to White. He stands in the end zone. He looks down the middle. He fires, and the ball is caught in the back of the end zone by Danny
It's a catch.
Amendola. Touchdown, Patriots.
It's a catch.
He made the grab just inside the end line, and New England has taken the lead.
I love Tom Brady. Man, Danny, playoff Amendola. He's such money on it. It's so money on his drive. But the composure of the quarterback, down and tight, Amendola elevates 1 foot.
What a catch.
2
right
foot.
Foot down,
Oh, my
left
God.
foot toe tap in the back of the end zone.
Clutch.
Oh, that's Scott Zolak. I don't know if there is a more excitable color analyst in all the NFL. He loves Tom Brady. He loves Tom Brady.
You know what? He also said your name.
He did?
Amendola was such money on this drive.
That's exactly what he meant. If I were out there running routes in a diminutive stature way like Danny Amendola, although I take that as a bit of a slight. I know I'm not a large man, but Amendola's clocking in at about 5'8". I'm at least 5'9". All right, let's get to Super Bowl 52 and maybe some of the not game-related questions, ideas that people are going to be talking about. We'll talk them, I guess we'll call them themes. How about that? Some themes, MVP we're going to get a look at, and just kind of speaking to what happened in the NFC Championship and how events that play out can dictate how a game is going to go. So why don't we get started with the very start of the game and something
the most predictive thing ever.
Exactly. That's right. unless the
Literally
coin
the
can land on its side.
Literally the definition of a 50-50
Yes.
proposition.
I don't know. It could again. It can land on its side, and then what are you going to do? Eventually, that's not going to happen.
No.
People do enjoy the coin toss for
Maybe
whatever
Minnesota
reason.
freeze midair.
I'll tell you, it is interesting as someone who called a game every week for the Chargers and had to let's go to the coin toss. Center field captains exchanging handshakes. Here goes to watch the way different teams approach the coin toss and whether they win or lose. And I would say, I believe of all 16 games, the Chargers played only one time did a team take the ball. Every other time, whoever won the coin toss deferred, and because that's what teams want now. They want to battle, try to flip the field on that first possession, get their offense better field position to start their opening drive instead of starting at the 25, which is your most likely outcome from a kickoff. And then, get that start of the second half kickoff and try to get that is something you always talk about, that extra possession. And that's why they're deferring. So get us started here, Cynthia. You've done some history.
Yep.
You've examined the history of the coin toss. What do we got?
Very important. Well, I actually think this one's more fun than the jersey color because you really have a choice with your jersey color. Obviously you have a choice if you're going to call heads or tails, but
I saw this on Twitter, by the way, and I support it wholeheartedly, and it's because I'm an old man.
Wholeheartedly.
But I do think this would be the ideal Super Bowl to have a throwback jersey Super Bowl, just to have Pat Patriot and those red, white, and blues, with the three-cornered hat guy hiking a football for the Pats. Maybe even make Tom Brady wear the Grogan neck roll as well. And the Eagles go back to that sort of lime green and bright silver wing on their helmet. I do think that's what they should do. They won't. We know that the Pats are going to wear their whites, and the Eagles are going to wear their forest greens. But damn, I'd like to see a Kelly green or more of that lime green Eagle outfit that like the Jerome Brown, Reggie White era Eagles used to wear. All right, that's it. I'm out. Now go ahead with your fancy coin toss.
All right, so we've had 51 Super Bowls. The coin has landed on heads 24 times, tails 27.
So about 50-50. Right about there.
Of the 51, 24 toss winners have gone on to win the Super Bowl, but 12 have been from heads and 12 have been from tails.
Well, I'm going to pay close attention now. I don't even have to watch the Super Bowl. All I got to do is watch the coin toss.
Past 4 coin tosses have come up tails. Okay. NFC has won the toss in 18 of past 20 coin tosses.
Interesting.
And the team that's won the coin toss has lost the past 3 Super Bowls.
There you go. You don't even have to watch the game. You can watch the coin toss.
No.
Make your way out to your party and your nachos and enjoy yourself.
That's just setting the stage here because you ready for the next part. So
should I sit down?
You really should.
Okay.
This is so predictive. It's going to just totally rock your world. Okay? Philadelphia won the coin toss in Super Bowl 15 and 39. Now, you know who 39 was against?
It was the Puke Bowl.
The Patriots.
Yeah.
Yep. They lost both times, or they won the toss both times, and they lost the game both times. But here's the best one.
What do we got?
You ready? New England. They've been in the Super Bowl 9 times. They've lost the coin toss 5 of the 9 times. Do you know what has happened in all 5 of those coin toss losses?
I don't know.
Hoisting the Lombardi Trophy.
So they want to lose the coin toss is what they're looking at.
Yes.
Okay.
So stupid. And in their
4 wins.
Yep.
Yep.
Even in their 4 times they've won the coin toss, even if they're favored, lost the game.
How about that?
Mm-hmm.
So there you go. I guess what we're saying is, based on the past, were that to be a predictor, the Eagles are going to win the coin toss, and the Patriots are going to win the Super Bowl.
Yep.
That's what we're looking for. Okay. You know what they say about tails, right?
That never fails.
There you go.
Except for the 24 times that it did fail.
Yes. So it turns out tails can, in fact,
fails at a rate of 50%.
We talked about this with the Vikings and how different we felt about the NFC Championship game. When they marched down the field against a very good defense, scored with ease, defense holds serve on the next possession, they now get the ball back and have a chance to go up by either 10 or 14. Didn't happen, and of course it unraveled from there. They were outscored 38-0 from that point on. What about kind of the idea of a team that scores first and how predictive that is when it comes to a Super Bowl? Because you get the sense, if you can get up early,
right,
you can really take control of a Super Bowl.
Well,
what have we seen?
If you watched the presser yesterday, so Wednesday, it's Thursday. I don't even know what the date is today. January 25th.
25th, I believe.
Thanks. So if you watch the presser on the 24th, Belichick was asked about the fact that the Patriots have not scored in the first quarter in all 7 of the Brady and
an
Belichick.
Offensive point.
Correct.
So
Correct.
they've had the defense scoop and score.
Correct.
Or
15
pick six.
total first quarter points. 15 total first quarter points scored in the Patriots in 7 Super Bowl appearances under Belichick. But none of those were scored by the Patriots offense.
How about that? Now, I guess that wouldn't include special teams then, right? Would we consider a field goal a non-offensive touchdown? Would that be a special team score?
No, it's like
is that what we would say?
Defense and special teams would be like safety. Well, I guess that'd be defense, right?
Yeah.
You could have a kickoff return.
I'm just trying to figure out if they would consider a field goal a special team score or an offensive score.
Probably a special team. No, probably an offensive score.
Okay.
I think that's an offense.
I just see the 15 total first quarter points, and I'm trying to figure out how they get to 15. Did they go for 2 once, and it was just 2 defensive touchdowns? Pardon my ignorance on Patriots Super Bowl history and whether or not there were pick sixes or scoop and scores. I would guess that might be the case. It just doesn't seem like Belichick's the kind of guy that would go for 2 that early in a game.
What happened in the Seattle game?
I just remember.
That first thing was
I'll tell you what happened in the Seattle game. They didn't run Marshawn Lynch. That's what happened in the Seattle game. All right.
All right,
so,
but who's the season leader in first possession points? Patriots. They have 54. They're
I can tell you who it wasn't. The Chargers.
No, it was certainly not. They had like
once,
4.
Once a single field goal through 16 games on their opening possession. Yes.
So the Patriots were 7 touchdowns, 2 field goals, but they ended up 5 punts and 2 interceptions on their first drive. That's kind of a recap of that. Philadelphia's defense is number 7 in allowing opponent first possession points. They've allowed 28 total, 2 touchdowns, 5 field goals, 6 punts. So if it's going to happen, it would most likely be a field goal, is what we're seeing from that. But I went back in history and I looked to see, well, what's gone on in these games when the Patriots haven't scored in the first quarter, overall. Last year, Patriots were number 3, 2014, 15. They really have never been, 15 was the lowest that they've ranked in terms of first possession points. For the most part, they're 1 or 3 or, top 6 at least, and their opponent has been in the bottom half. So it's very interesting that you might want to think
if you're playing trends, you think it would be
a field goal by the Eagles is probably where it nets out when you stack up who's going to score first.
Because they're going to lose. No, Philly's going to win the coin toss based on past, right? Mm-hmm. And then the Patriots are going to defer. So the Eagles are going to get first possession. They're going to be able to move the ball enough.
I love the story.
We're just trying to figure this out, right? Against the Patriots defense that tends to make adjustments and becomes much more stout after halftime because Matt Patricia's a rocket scientist, and he needs to see things laid out in front of him before he can really get his defensive game plan going. All right, I like that. We're going Eagles field goal as the first score of the game. All right. What about halftime? Now, we've seen that with the Patriots. Look, I'm half joking, but the Patriots are one of the best halftime adjustment teams and always have been under Bill Belichick. So what are we looking at come halftime here?
So just to set the level set here, they have the second most points per game on the season, number 1 over the last 8 games of the regular season. So 28.6 was the whole season. Over the last 8 games, that number went to 30.3. But if you look in just the first half, where are they scoring more of their points? Last 8 regular season games, the average was 16. The Eagles, by the way, 12.3. And then in the postseason, this actually flipped. The Eagles have been scoring 16.5 by halftime, and the Patriots 15.5.
Now, it is extremely important to point out the Eagles had 28 points or 24 points at the half against, I think, what was it, 28, 24? I think it was 24.
Right.
So that's going to skew that dramatically.
In 2 games,
you're getting
you're getting like a low number. But even if you add those 2 together, that's still over 30 points by the time you get to halftime. So that is interesting to me. So I went and I looked to see okay, so what happens scoring at the end of the half? So the Pats offense is 4th best at scoring at the end of the half. They scored 77 points at the end of the first half in the season. And they have the 6th best 2-minute offense. But Philadelphia is the best at preventing scoring at the end of the half. And the Patriots defense actually is 2nd best at preventing score at the end of the half. So it's interesting when
they're 2-minute defenses, yeah. And we saw that. We saw that against the Eagles with the Vikings. Remember,
Right.
they held them, and then all of a sudden they run their 2-minute drill. They end up scoring. Same thing with the Patriots. So yeah, that's a bit. It's so odd when you try to figure that out. Are they playing prevent? Is it just the hurry up? What the heck is going on? And why does it seem so easy to move the ball against a really good defense in those 2-minute drills or those 90-second drills like we saw in both games?
So we're definitely not going to give away the final score.
Oh, we're not?
No, for today we got the Super Bowl
Next
score.
week?
Next, we got to keep them.
So you're giving away the halftime score?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's a good bargain,
Sure.
right? Like, we're not going to give you the full
It's
score.
the off week. We're halfway to Super Bowl. Sure.
Yep. So my model has for the most likely halftime score. Are you ready for this?
I am.
14-12.
14-12.
Uh-huh.
That doesn't. We got to tweak your model. Can we adjust it to either 10? Can we, if you were going to
All right, let's
adjust
go
it to
10.
either 10 or 14? What
Let's
do we
go
want to do?
14-10.
14-10.
Can I
Yep.
jump in this conversation
Please,
real
Yes.
quick? Because I've been looking up what you guys were questioning earlier about how Bill Belichick saying
This
the
is
Patriots.
producer John, by the way.
Hi.
Hi, John.
Saying the Patriots don't often score points or never score points in the first quarter of the Super Bowl. So of the 7 Super Bowls that Belichick has taken the Patriots to, in 4 of them, there have literally been no points scored in the first quarter.
By either team.
By either team. 4 of them finished the first quarter 0-0. So I don't know if your model, your 14-12 at halftime model, might be a little high.
Well, I know your producer John, we like to call him PJ, is a
It's first time.
fan of the
Literally
sweet
first time.
science, you
Yes.
know, and as your pugilistic background will tell you, John, this is the feeling out process, you know, dancing around the ring, maybe throwing a few jabs here and there, take a body shot or two, but you don't want to expose yourself to that big haymaker, and that's always been the Belichickian way. In this dystopian era of Belichick football in the NFL. So I'm just word soup, word diarrhea is what I just gave you there.
I
All
like
right,
it.
back to the halftime score.
14-10.
Okay, 14-10.
Yep.
What else you got?
14-10. Turnovers. That's where we're going next.
Important.
Pretty important. Probably the most important for everything. We talked about Case Keenum last week. So New England's offense, number 2 fewest turnovers on the season. They have 12. 8 were interceptions and 4 were fumbles lost. But here's the thing you got to look at. How many total fumbles were there, and then how many fumbles lost? 13 total fumbles, and then only 4 were fumbles lost. So they do a good job of minimizing the
Recovering.
Yep, recovering. Then they also gave up the 3rd fewest points off of giveaways. But I want to look at the ratio. So they have 45 points off of those 12 turnovers, right? So that's 3.75 points if they turn the ball over. In other words, if Philadelphia is able to create turnovers, this could be this is the recipe to unseed or whatever. What is it? Dethrone. What?
Dethrone.
Dethrone.
There you go.
There we go.
Unseat or dethrone.
Unseat.
There you go.
Okay. Seat. I
I mean, it depends. Are we in a monarchy? Are we in a democracy? Are we in an oligarchy?
I think it's kind of
what are
like
we
a
operating in?
monarchy.
We call him King Tom. Is that
King
his?
Tom. I mean, kind of.
We are his fiefdom.
I mean, I've pretty much done that.
Although, you know what? It didn't happen in the Jacksonville game, right? The turnover battle leaned Jacksonville's way, and it looked like time was on their side. And next thing you know, here's Tom Brady doing what we all expected him to eventually do regardless.
I guess when you score the most points on the season, then when you have a turnover very infrequently and it nets more than a field goal in points, that is one. Do you see what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, it is odd. The one stat in there, the number that kind of sticks out to me is the fewest points off giveaways.
3rd fewest points.
Just because, like, when you watch the New England defense, they're not that impressive. Like, they don't jump off the screen at you like, man, I sure would hate to go against this defense. But then you look at the pressure rate.
Wait, so now that's New England. Like, that's how many points the other team score.
That's what I mean.
Yeah. Okay.
So it just seems like it is one of those defenses that rises to the occasion. That, like we said, in the second half when they're down, they seem to get into another gear. It's the proverbial switch that is flipped. The Jordan Bulls, the New England, the Tom Brady, Belichick, Bill Belichick Patriots. There seems to be the ability to get your performance up to another level when it is required in order to win a game. And obviously the best example of that was in last year's Super Bowl when they're down 28-3. And granted, they got some cooperation from the Falcons and the play calling, but it's always happened. In this era of football with Tom Brady and Bill Belichick, this team has found itself in adverse situations, and they are seemingly always able to overcome them.
Mm-hmm. I mean, at some point they're not, right? But we haven't seen that happen in Super Bowls.
It's almost, you think about the losses, right? The 2 losses to the Giants, I believe in both of those, the Patriots were ahead. It's like you don't want Tom Brady to get behind. You don't want the Patriots to be behind in a late game situation because it almost seems like it seals your fate. If they're ahead for whatever reason, that's when you have a chance to strike and knock them off. All right.
So I want to talk about the Philadelphia defense really quick. So they've had 31 takeaways. That's 4th most in the league. 19 of those were interceptions, and 12 were fumbles that were returned or that were recovered. So that's 4th most interceptions in the league, which same as their total takeaways. But they've recovered 12 of the 19 fumbles they've seen. So they're very good at recovering fumbles. So one of the Patriots' deficiencies or one of their strengths is also a strength for the Eagles. So whoever wins, if there's a fumble, whoever recovers that fumble, that's a pretty big advantage there because strength versus strength. Okay. And they've allowed the 5 defensive touchdowns, which is number 2 fewest in the league. On the other side, Philadelphia's offense, 20 turnovers, 9 of them were interceptions, 11 were fumbles lost, but they lost 11 fumbles off 25 this on, so 14.
It's a lot of times coughing a ball up. That's for
sure.
25.
It sure is.
And losing 11 is also a very high number.
Yep. That's 24th highest in case
right.
you were keeping track. But they have the 7th fewest points off of giveaways, so 52 points off of 20 giveaways, so 2.6 points per giveaway.
Okay.
Patriots defense has 18 defensive takeaways, which ranks 25th. 12 were interceptions and 6 fumbles. The 12 interceptors actually rank 18. And New England's defense has also seen 19 fumbles, but they've only recovered 6 of them. So
all of this is great, Cynthia, but I can't stop thinking about that Fletcher Cox nugget that you said you had that you were going to share with us. What is it? What is the Fletcher Cox nugget? Because it was the only player that Bill Belichick really was effusive with praise. He was obviously celebrating the Eagles as he does every one of his opponents, but he singled out Fletcher Cox and mentioned what a special player he is.
So think of the number 13. 13%, right? That's the 2nd highest in the league. That's the number of times that every time Fletcher Cox was on the field, he either gets a hurry, hit, or quarterback sack on a passing down.
Okay, that's pretty good.
13%. There's only one person in the entire league who's higher than him in that by percentage, and they didn't play as many snaps because you have a higher percentage
right.
who plays fewer snaps.
Who is it?
We're not going to talk about him.
Okay,
fine.
He's
not playing.
This is Fletcher Cox's shine.
You've heard of him.
Spotlights on Fletcher Cox.
This guy lives around here. Well,
I
don't know where he lives, but
it's Aaron Donald.
Yeah.
Other than that, it's Fletcher Cox. So there's reason why. I mean that. And look, what do you always say? People just think Belichick's only going to take away the most dominant player on the opposing team's offense. You would assume he's probably of all the players on the field more concerned about taking Fletcher Cox away.
Yep.
That is going to be the point of his. I guess what keeps him up at night and what he wants to figure out.
I just want to point out that last week there were six pressures for Fletcher Cox alone.
Ridiculous.
Let's put that to level set that a little bit. There are teams where some guys an entire season get 20, and that's not bad, right? It's 6
in one
game.
Again, and a lot of that is also game script. You know what I mean? Because they had to pass a lot.
They did, but it's still
they're still trying to block you.
And Minnesota's O-line isn't bad.
Right.
They weren't the best in the league this year, but we did not believe that would be the case. I was watching them. You're just like, wow, okay, Fletcher Cox is good.
All right, so Fletcher Cox is good. Perhaps a potential MVP. Let's get to this fancy list that you handed me here.
Yes.
All these MVPs.
Oh, yes.
All these MVPs, Cynthia. And what if you had to project, based on what all of your numbers tell you, who's going to get out of this thing with the MVP? What jumps out at you?
So I don't think it's anything surprising when you look back in history. You see that 28 of the 52 MVPs. So there are 52 because in one year there was a tie, so 2 people got the MVP. So in 1 year there's 52, so 28 quarterbacks, and only 1 person has come from a losing team overall.
I'm going to just kind of focus on modern era. So I'll go back to Super Bowl 40, where Hines Ward won in a contest in which I believe that was Ben Roethlisberger's second season. He had a horrible game, and it just did not make – obviously, you're not going to give it to the quarterback there. Hines Ward had a really good game. Mm-hmm. But then when you go through, it's quarterback. It's basically all quarterbacks except What I thought was a bad MVP award to Santonio Holmes, that was given to him based on one play, that last play. And look, it was a remarkable catch, but by no means
That's how Shecky said
was he the most valuable player of that contest. It was just a hell of a grab to get the 4-point win over the Cards and the sideline there of the end zone. And the other one was because the Seahawks had a game manager at quarterback in Russell Wilson, and their defense just wrecked Peyton Manning and the Broncos. So you had to give it to a guy who had an interception for a touchdown and a fumble recovery in Malcolm Smith. Otherwise, it seems like we just look at quarterbacks. I mean, that's most likely, as you pointed out, 28 of them over half the time, it is a quarterback that gets this award.
So speaking of the quarterback, obviously Tom Brady's in competition with just himself to become the only guy to do 4-time Super Bowl MVP.
He's won 3 so far.
No, he
should have won 4. They didn't want to give him the Deion Branch
4.
one. He's got 4?
Yeah, he's going for 5. He's going for 5.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, he's going for 5. He passed Joe Montana last year, and then he's going for 5.
Ah.
And ultimately, there's a bug that's chasing me.
There's a bug coming at you?
There's a bug that's chasing me in here. So he's going for his 5th one to, only displace himself. He's also going to become, if he has 279 passing yards, he becomes the first player in NFL history to earn 10,000 passing yards in a postseason.
I think he's going for his 4th, isn't he?
I think it's 5th.
Because Deion Branch got it the one year. They didn't give it to Tom.
Are you ready? Tom, last year.
This has been fact-checked. Cynthia is correct.
I'm an idiot. Which one am I missing? I know he won it against the Rams.
Okay, so Panthers.
Right?
Well, last year against the
oh, right. Last year he won it. That's what I'm forgetting. Last year against the Falcons.
Yep.
Gotcha. My mistake.
It's okay. I mean, come on. I do that all the time.
You should know these things.
But my order, if I was going to pick, so obviously
Tom's number 1.
Tom's
with
number
a bullet. Not even close.
Right. Like by a mile. Now the bug's chasing you.
That's all right.
Okay. So if you think about it though, then the second most likely person to win it would be Nick Foles, because if the Eagles win, then it's most likely the quarterback in that situation too.
And he was the MVP of the NFC Championship game.
Right. And then obviously, so for me, Rob Gronkowski's number 3. And then if you go down to the next one, it's really interesting because it ends up being Brandon Cooks, which was I was a bit surprised by this because Philadelphia has a great passing defense. They've not allowed more than 70 yards to an individual player. I have Brandon Cooks in the end zone, but less than 70 yards, which is a funny little benchmark there. 5 receptions is another threshold that I have Brandon Cooks staying under, and the Eagles don't allow more than 5 to any one receiver. And
I guess that speaks to the idea that if the Eagles are going to win with a dominant defense and a running game, they rotate their back so much that you probably can't think of a Terrell Davis-like performance where Jay Ajayi is going to get 25 carries and 3 touchdowns.
Exactly. Jay Ajayi ends up being about 1, 2, 3. I think he's 4th. Yeah, he's after Deion Lewis for me, and he's the second highest ordered on the Eagles.
And I think a lot of this will also come into what you're going to share with us next week, and that's what your model says eventually becomes the winner, because rarely, as in almost every single time save one, does a player from a losing team not win the MVP.
There's one time.
Keenum goes into a long count, straightens up, takes the snap. Here comes the rush. He's hit, and it's intercepted. It's picked off by Robinson. Robinson at the 30. Cuts back across the field. Patrick Robinson looks for a block. Now he's at the 20. He's at the 15, the 10, the 5. Touchdown! Patrick Robinson!
All right, let's give some shine to the bridesmaids, Cynthia, and
I've been a bridesmaid a lot.
What they do in the World Cup, the third place game, the bronze medal game. When you think about the Miracle on Ice, they did play a bronze medal game after, and it was the Russians that were in that bronze medal game, because remember, it was the semis that the USA knocked off those commies. So let's get to the Jags Vikings. If in fact we could get ourselves, that's what we should have. We should have the third place game the week between the end of Championship Sunday and the Super Bowl. I love the Pro Bowl. It's great. It's fun. I like the skills competitions and all that. But man, would a third place game be great?
I don't need an actual game. I just want to see
play the bronze medal game. There we go. So what would happen? What does the model say would happen if the Jags and Vikings tangled for a bronze medal?
So I took a little bit of liberty in terms of projecting injury reports, with Marcel Darius and Pat Elflein being hurt. That was actually a really key matchup in this game.
Turns out
turns out that.
So did you project them as healthy or no?
I projected them as healthy
Okay.
because, in my opinion, if they were going to the Super Bowl, they would probably find a way in 2 weeks to get
Is it
healthy.
neutral site or is it at Minnesota?
At Minnesota.
Okay.
Because that was the best.
That's the neutral site.
Well,
I guess that makes
technically.
sense, right? That technically is your neutral site.
Yeah, so it was at home, and that did somewhat factor into it, just because you do get a little bump.
I
in
guess
that
that's
game.
weird. This year it would not have mattered. Neutral site or home game, still the same. It would
Still
be
the
in
same.
Minnesota. So what happens?
23-21 Minnesota, 56.1% of the time, assuming those two players I mentioned were healthy. So I went with, I didn't say full health. I just said, kind of like an 80%, which is what I would have done right now had they been playing.
For the Super Bowl.
Right.
This
right.
is what your projection would be.
Yeah. So
The poor Viking fans. You just torture them, Cynthia. You couldn't have the Jags beat them, so they didn't have to play the what-if game. Instead, you have them coming out victorious. They would have won their first ever Super Bowl. They would have done it at their
At
home
home.
stadium.
Listen, I've been a bridesmaid a lot. It's not a bad life. It's not a bad life.
Tell that to the Viking fans after telling them that your model had them beating the Jaguars. At least you didn't have a model of them beating the Patriots as well.
I did not.
So
I did not.
So take that to your your homes in Minnesota.
In Minnesota, well, I can tell you who's going to score some touchdowns potentially.
Say who?
Too. Adam Thielen and our guy Rudolph.
Kyle Rudolph, okay.
Kyle, who, by the way, scores touchdowns after,
Had the big touchdown to start the game in the NFC Championship
after
game.
being on this pod, he never stopped scoring touchdowns.
I think he had 30
like 35.
after he appeared on the pod.
I think 30 as well, maybe even more. So ultimately, what was the difference maker in this one? It was the fact that there wasn't going to be 3 turnovers likely in Minnesota. The third down defense projected to, outmatch Blake Bortles, and then we saw with that Jacksonville O-line the ability for them to get pressured. Now, again, I tried to project everyone as being at least somewhat healthy because the O-line is better than what we saw. However, it was not unlikely for Blake Bortles to sustain playing at such a high passer rating, completion percentage, given the fact that, look, we've seen him have good games. He played well. I gave him his shine. We're not calling him trash or garbage. Trash. We're not calling him trash.
Clowney. Blake Bortles is
but
trash.
Every quarterback has games where they play better and games where they play worse. And when you're facing a defense like Minnesota's, it's hard to project that you would stay playing better. Right? That's any quarterback.
More of the Bills game than the
Yes.
Patriots game is what you're saying from Blake Bortles.
Yep.
All right, well, there you have it. Had the Super Bowl been Jags, Vikings, and were there, as there should be, a bronze medal game,
There should be.
you got the Vikings coming out ahead.
Call
by
Roger.
2,
Roger,
23-21.
let's get Roger on the phone.
Let's get it done. Well, you know what? He'll be at Super Bowl, and we'll
I
be
will.
at Super Bowl week in Minnesota. So we'll speak to you from there next week. A big thank you to the sponsor of today's podcast, late night flights out of Minnesota, huh? Minneapolis, St. Paul. There's a 1040 that comes back to the West Coast. Good luck getting on that one. Thanks for listening, if you have not already. Maybe somebody on
By
this
the way,
podcast is on it. Make sure.
Money's kidding. Well, he's not kidding.
I'm
He's
not.
taking that.
10:40 p.m.,
But
baby.
they didn't sponsor our podcast.
Might as well be. Here we go. The podcast, as you know, can be subscribed to, and boy, would we appreciate it if you left
Please.
us a rating and a review on iTunes. It helps us continue to grow the pod. We will do the Cynthia Frelund 10,000 simulation Super Bowl prediction in exactly 1 week from today. Today is Thursday, January 25th. We'll do it live from some
The Hilton.
banquet room in some hotel,
We'll tweet out where if
undisclosed
you'd like
location.
to come say hello.
There you go. No, I don't mingle with the public.
Listen, all I know is that I know a lot of people who are super excited to meet Money.
Yeah, there
and
are none.
no, it's
promise
true.
you. It's
I'm
not
telling
true.
you, there's a lot of people who are just super excited to meet Money. I can't wait.
Not
Can't wait to make their dreams come true.
If you show up at Radio Row, I'll be happy to say hello. I believe I have to share a table with 6 other radio stations. So look for the guy who
Money
is
only likes healthy snacks too.
with all the Claire's bags, because I'm going to be shopping all over the Mall of America before I get on the radio show and get things rolling. All right. Thanks for listening and downloading. We certainly appreciate it. We'll be with you again next week here on the Game Theory and Money Podcast.